All right, well, good morning, church. How are we doing today? Come on, it's good to be together. Let's stand to our feet. It's week 3 of our 3-week challenge after Easter. Y'all did it. Come on, we're going to celebrate in the atrium afterwards, but we're going to start out with praise on our lips. Let's give thanks to our God. Come on.
We'll give praise to the Lord. Beside him there's no other. So give thanks to the Lord. Love endures forever. Give praise to the Lord. Beside him there's no other. This is, come on. This is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day the Lord has made. Oh, I will rejoice and be glad in it. He brought us from morning to dancing, from glory to glory. This is the day the Lord has made. So what are we waiting for? That's good news. It's good news to the poor and beauty for my ashes. So what are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? This is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day the Lord has made. Oh, I will rejoice and be glad in it. He brought us from morning to dancing, from glory to glory. This is the day the Lord has made. So what are we waiting for? Come on and praise the Lord. What are we waiting for? Come on and praise the Lord. Oh, praise the Lord. I live to tell what the Lord has done. I live to sing of my Savior's love. I live because He is risen. All right, come on, remind yourself. I live to tell what the Lord has done. I live to sing of my Savior's love. I live because He is risen. Oh, He's risen. Yeah. This is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day the Lord has made. Oh, I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day the Lord has made. Oh, I will rejoice and be glad in it. He brought us from morning to dancing, from glory to glory, from morning to dancing, from glory to glory, from morning to dancing, from glory Sing this together. You came. And you came from heaven's throne, acquainted with our sorrows, to train the debt we owe. It's your suffering for our freedom. The Lamb of God in my place, your blood poured out, my sin erased. It was my death you died. I am raised to life. Hallelujah, the Lamb of God. And my name upon your heart, my shame upon your shoulders, the power of sin undone, the cross for my salvation. The Lamb of God in my place, your blood poured out, my sin erased. It was my death you died. I am raised to life. Hallelujah, the Lamb of God. There is no greater love, and there is no greater love than my Savior lives it up. And there is no greater love. We lift his name. There is no greater love. There is no greater. We lift his name. Then the Savior lives it up. There is no greater love. The Lamb of God in my place, your blood poured out, my sin erased. It was my death you died. I am raised to life. Hallelujah, the Lamb of God. The Lamb of God in my place, your blood poured out, my sin erased. It was my death you died. I am raised to life. Hallelujah, the Lamb of God. Oh, the Lamb of God, we give him praise.
Come on, if you know this, sing this out with me. Oh, yes, God, you're so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. So good to me, Lord. Amazing love that welcomes me, the kindness of mercy that bought with blood wholeheartedly
my soul undeserving. Yeah, God, you're so good. God, you're so good. Yes, you are. God, you're so good. You're so good to me.
I hold the cross, age to age, and hour by hour. The dead are raised, the sinners saved. The work of your power, oh God, you're so good. Come on. God, you're so good. He deserves it. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. Yes.
God, you're so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. Come on, here's why. I am blessed, I am called, I am healed, I am whole, I am saved in Jesus' name. Highly favored, anointed, filled with your power for the glory of Jesus' name. I am blessed, I am called, I am healed, I am whole, I am saved in Jesus' name. Highly favored, anointed, filled with your power for the glory of Jesus' name. And should this life bring suffering, Lord, I will remember what Calvary has bought for me, both now and forever. Come on, if you know God's been good to you, come on, let's sing this together. Say, oh God, you're so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. I've tasted and seen, yes, God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You've always been good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. I am blessed. I am blessed. I am called. I am so good to me, Lord.
All right. Thank you for your worship this morning, Westridge. Just imagine how the heart of God must feel right now. You can be seated. Thank you so much for worshiping our good, good Father. Well, there's a few things that we want to make you aware of that's happening in the life of our family here at Westridge right now. First of all, tomorrow night is our monthly night of prayer. What a neat time to come together, powerful night to come together to pray for one another, to pray over our church, to bring our needs before the Lord. There's just something really, really special and powerful about those times when we gather together. So I hope you'll be able to be with us tomorrow night here at 7 o'clock for 1 hour. One of the most significant things that we do all year long is our kids ministry camp. We call it Surge. It's a sports and arts camp. We have over 30 different tracks available this year. And here's what's important to know. Tonight, registration opens at 6:12 p.m. 6:12 p.m., yeah. And here's why that is, 6:12. Because we have one of the most creative kids pastors in the country. And he just thought it would be great if we did it at 6:12 instead of 6:10 or 6 o'clock or anything like that. I think he was just trying to help us remember that Surge begins on June the 12th and runs through the 16th. So we all get it. But it's going to be opening tonight at 6:12. For those of you who will be registering, let me give you a little help. So on our Surge page, which is at westridge.com/surge, if you scroll down toward the bottom, you'll see pro tips for registration. If you click on that link, there's all kinds of information there that will help you ahead of time to be prepared to have everything that you'll need to register your kids for our kids camp. So as families are doing that over the next 3 weeks, here's what I want to ask every one of you, whether you have kids in our kids ministry or not. And that is to pray with us and Bren and the whole, just all of our families as they are registering, because we are encouraging our families and our kids to invite their friends and their neighbors and their family members to come and be a part of the opportunity to hear the gospel, have the opportunity to respond to that, either in large group or in their small group time. So we can all be a part of that if we're in prayer for that over the next 3 weeks. So family, we'd love it if you do that with us. So whether it's Surge, whether it's Rush, which is coming up in just about a month. Yesterday, our Guatemala team landed safely on the ground that we prayed over last week. So thank you for praying for that. They're looking forward to a great week of ministry, whether it's all the things that are happening in our special needs ministry and in that space up there. All of that happens because of the generosity of those who call Westridge home. If you ever ask yourself, does it really matter? When I give, when I try to be generous, does it really make a difference? And I can tell you that God uses your generosity to do important and great things all across the ministry here at Westridge. Things that you see and many things that you may not see. God is faithful to us in that way. Well, today, if you are here and maybe you've not had the opportunity to give yet and you'd like to join in with us, you can do that just in one of 3 ways, whether you're watching online or you're here in person. And you can do that through our website, through our app, or through the mail. And for those of you who are in the room, you can give at the door on your way out. Well, as Jason mentioned at the very beginning of the service, we are celebrating today because this is week 3 of our 3-week challenge, and we are just celebrating throughout the day, and even after the service, Pastor Brian is going to come up and share a little bit about that. We're so excited about that. But something special that we have for you right now is we have Kenn Kington coming today as our guest communicator, our guest teacher for the hour. We really love Kenn. Kenn is a professional comedian. He travels all over the country and all over the world doing his comedy show. He speaks at large corporate events. He speaks at other large church events like this. It's his full-time thing. But here's what we love the most about Kenn is that Kenn is one of us. He is a part of our Westridge family. He is here when he is not traveling. He and his family are here as part of our 9 o'clock service. And so we just love Kenn Kington. So Westridge, 11 o'clock service, will you give a warm welcome to Kenn as he comes and teaches us today?
Thank you, my brother. Actually, my wife sleeps in and we come to 11, probably more than 9. But It is a joy to be with you guys this morning, and I want to start out by just kind of giving us a frame of time. And that would be, how many of you are or remember when you were 17 years old? Okay, that's not everybody. Or do you not remember that far back, or how does that work? But I remember being 17, and I remember it was a realization time for me. I was a senior in high school. I graduated a little bit early. And I'll never forget that several ideas, dreams that I had did not come true. I love sports, but I went to one of the biggest schools in the state, and there were a lot of talented people there, and I was average at best. I played basketball and baseball, and by my senior year, I did not make the team as a senior in baseball or basketball, and it was my dream. I loved basketball, and they went on to win the state title. In baseball, they were fourth in the state, and I ended up running cross country one time just so I could let her, and we had the number one runner in the state, so I was never going to win. And it was one of those realizations, so I started to work. And what I lacked in athleticism and with scholarship, because I in school, I had a learning disorder. I was not the smartest kid by any stretch, and unfortunately at the time, they did unweighted GPAs, which meant PE counted the same as chemistry. And that's the only way I had a 3.0. If I was today, it'd be like a 2.3 or something like that. So I knew I wasn't smart and I wasn't talented, but I worked hard. So I got a job, and I was working to save up money for college, and I was going to go to college, even though the counselor said, yeah, you're really not college material. And I was just like, okay, but I'm going. So I saved up money, and I worked hard, and I kind of made some inroads. And went half day my senior year, and then was able to graduate a little early so I could work full time, save some money. But I love sports, so I worked at a sporting goods store. And at this sporting goods store, I kind of raised up to where I actually ran a department in the store. I was the youngest in the country that ran this department out of several stores. And I'll never forget, it was spring. And we're putting out gloves, baseball gloves. And there was a gentleman who had just been hired. His name was Rudy Kennard. And Rudy was helping me put out some gloves, and he had another position, another department, but it was all focused on spring sports. So we're putting them out, and Rudy goes, man, I love this glove. It was a Wilson A2000. And if you know baseball, and I did not know it that well at that point, this glove was over $300. And I was like, dude, you had an A2000? He goes, oh, that's the funny story, because, yeah, this is the glove I used when I played pro ball. And I was like, you played pro ball? I mean, he was tall, strapping, he was an athlete. And I said, he goes, you didn't know I played ball? I'm like, no. And he says, yeah, actually, this is a really funny story, because I had my A2000, and the year I got invited to spring training with the Kansas City Royals, the first couple days, I'm taking ground balls before a game, and the webbing in my glove broke right before the game. So I run in the dugout, hey, does anybody have an extra fielder's glove? And this one catcher said, yeah, I think there's one in my bag. And he says, can I borrow it just today and get mine fixed? He goes, yeah, you can borrow it. He says, I borrowed it. I went and played. It's like, man, this is really good. I really like this glove. Do you mind if I use it till mine gets fixed? And the guy goes, just keep it. He said, mine got fixed, but I got used to it, and I love this glove. And he says, I literally went back to him and said, hey, do you mind, can I pay you for this? I want to use this one and use my A2000 as a backup. He goes, just keep it. End of the year. Fast forward to the end of the year. If you know baseball, towards the end of the year, the rosters expand, and he got pulled up to the Royals. He was in a AAA, got pulled up, ended up playing an American League Championship Series. The Royals were in it that year, and then played in a World Series. He got in the game several times, and he goes back to this catcher. After it's all said and done, he goes, man, I love this glove. He said, I want to buy it from you. And he goes, man, just keep it. And he goes, no, you don't understand. I'm going to pay you. Money is no object. I got a bonus for getting pulled up, bonus for playing in the ALCS, bonus for playing in the World Series. I'm paying you for this glove. And he goes, really seriously, keep it. I'm a catcher. It's just one, I'll never use that glove. I've got my catcher's mitts. He goes, no, I'm paying you. How much is it? And sheepishly, he just went, okay, if you want to know the truth. He says, got traded to the Royals in the offseason. I'm headed into spring training. And I remembered in my contract, the Royals require catchers to carry a fielder's glove in their bag. And you're fined if you don't have one. On the way into Fort Myers into spring training, I stopped at a drugstore. And I found the cheapest glove that would fit on my hand. And I threw it in my bag because I knew I would never use it. He says, you want to pay me? It's $10. And he said, what? You're telling me that I just used a $10 drugstore glove and played in a World Series with a $10 drugstore glove? And he said, yeah. And as he told me that story, I thought of my world. And the world will define us, and I know I did, and internalize it by what we are not and what we don't measure up. And God just whispered in my heart in that time, it's not the instrument, it is the master with the instrument that makes the difference. Yes, you can clap for that. And this morning, I want to just share 2 chapters with you that I genuinely hope you will go back and read this week over and over, because you will get so much more than I can share, and so much more intimate and intricate and individual. In John chapter 9 is where we're going to be, but I want you to just mark Psalm 34 as well, because there's an amazing story in the entire chapter 9, and I believe it shows us the steps to what Jesus calls the abundant life. And it's through a story of a man who was born blind. And in the first part of this story, the very first of that chapter, it says, as he went along, he saw a man born blind. His disciples asked, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in him. Now I want you to just stop for a second and think of this first step. This man, if you read the whole chapter, you'll see he was aware of Jesus. He had an encounter with God passively. He had heard about Jesus. He had heard others talk about Jesus. He knew his condition. And that is where several of us are, and unfortunately, specifically with the greatest needs in our life. Brian did a beautiful job on Easter talking about discouragement, and how the different pieces that add into discouragement are hopelessness, uncertainty, and disappointment. Now let me ask a question. How many of you at some point in your life have been hopeless, discouraged, or disappointed? Raise your hands. Yes. Now I want to get personal. Don't raise your hands. How many of us have come to that point where we're going through something right now, we're just resolved? This is the way it's always going to be. I'm never going to measure up in this. I'm never going to have that. And as a kid to an adult, it starts to become more prevalent. I wanted to play in the NBA. Turns out I'm short, I'm slow, and I can't jump. Now, how many of you heard this phrase growing up? You can be anything you want to be. Do you remember that? What a crock that turned out to be. I wanted to play in the World Series. It turns out I can't hit a fastball. I peaked at 12 years old. Not good. And I would practice too. I would go out by myself on a driveway thinking about making the buzzer beater in the college Final Four, and I would shoot. And it would be 3, 2, 1, and I would shoot over and over and over, all by myself, making that shot. Sometimes I made it, sometimes I was fouled. And I got to shoot foul shots. And I learned that, you know what? Sometimes dreams die. We can't be whatever we want to be. And then I got into adult life, and I thought, once I get a real job and I get a real paycheck, I am going to do well. And I did well. I was in a Fortune 500 growth company. I was in the top 10 in sales. And I thought, man, I am going to be rich. Can I tell you, at that point in my life, I was further in debt than I thought any human could be. And I remember, I hope you don't raise your hands, but have you ever prayed, Lord, please let the rapture happen? That is the only way I'm getting out of debt. Okay, some of you do feel like that as well. But I share that to say this in these first 2 verses. Jesus walks up to a man who is blind. That is his hopelessness. He is a man. His parents say it later. He's of age. He can speak for himself. And Jesus walks up to where he is within earshot. And in verse 5, I love what Jesus said. He said, I am the light of the world to a man who is born blind. And he's about to do something. We're about to move from an encounter passively with Jesus to something big, because the truth is we cannot be what we want to be, but we can be what we were meant to be. And the way we discover that is Jesus. He is the light of the world to light up our hopelessness and not only show us what he wants to do, but what we were meant to be, and then to walk us into that. We do not serve a high priest who is unaware, but has been through everything that we have and will go through and wants to walk with us. And the resurrection that is so beautiful is his way of tearing that curtain and saying, I'm coming into your world. The question is, am I going to let Jesus into my world? Or am I going to sit back passively, hear a sermon, agree with the truth, go, yep, that's good, and passively just hope for the best? Or am I going to step in and say, you know what, I'm going to take this second step. I'm going to engage God personally. Let me give you a beautiful example of this. A buddy of mine was telling me about his best friend. Best friend, he said he's a little bit different, and he said he had decided to take a vacation, but he was a Lee Iacocca fan. Now, if you don't know Lee Iacocca, if you saw the movie Ford and Ferrari, did anybody see that movie? Okay. Lee Iacocca was the guy with Ford who created the Mustang, okay? Cool muscle car, and he was the guy. Well, he would go on. He got fired from Ford, but he went on to Chrysler and Plymouth when it was in bankruptcy, about to shut down. And he looked at the needs, and he saw the potential, and he says, you know what? Families want something bigger than a station wagon. We're going to build a minivan. If you've seen a minivan, that's because of Lee Iacocca, okay? Not as cool as Mustang, but very functional. And this guy was Lee Iacocca fan. He read his book. He read articles about him. He listened to him. He's like, this is how crazy he was. That particular year, Paul and I are having lunch, and he says, my friend, he took vacation in the middle of winter to go to Detroit. Now, let me just say, I love Kevin and Brian, but Detroit is not exactly a vacation destination, all right? But he wanted to go to the car show because he heard Lee Iacocca speaking at the car show. He books the ticket. He gets to the hotel. He goes, sits in one of the front rows to hear Lee Iacocca speak. He said it made his day, and he says, so how was it? And he's like, it was the greatest and the worst trip ever. He said, what do you mean the worst trip? He says, I got there. I got to hear him. I got to see him. Everything was going great. I got back to the hotel. I came in on the ground floor. The elevator started going up, stopped at the main floor, and he says, I'm in the elevator by myself. The doors open, and Lee Iacocca walks onto the elevator. And he said, oh, my, and he said, I couldn't help it. I'm like, Mr. Iacocca, I'm such a huge fan. I took vacation. I came here, and you're amazing. And he said they just went on. And Lee Iacocca was like, well, thank you very much. It's very kind of you. That's awesome. Wow, that's really impressive. Thank you so much. He says, I told him all this, got to my floor, and the doors open, and I started to walk out. And Lee Iacocca said, hey, yeah, thank you so much, but can I ask you a question? He says, Lee Iacocca wanted me to ask me a question. He says, you can ask me anything. And he says, I turn around. As the doors finished opening, and I walk out, and it starts to close, he goes, what kind of car do you drive? And he said, I sat there, and I just went, I drive a Honda. He encountered Lee Iacocca in his life to that point passively. He believed everything he said, but it didn't impact his life. And in this story we're looking at, this man born blind had heard about Jesus, passively heard, understood, but he was about to make a journey from his head to his heart. 18 inches, but 1,000,000 miles. And when we decide we're going to invite God and engage God in our worst, our hopeless, our regret, that's where God does the miraculous. And my challenge and question to you and I today, am I willing to let Jesus in my world of hopelessness and uncertainty and do whatever he says? Now, I've probably read this story 100 times, and I read it kind of in a passive mode. But for one of the first times I read it actively, look what he says in verse 6. This is right after he says, I am the light of the world. He said, after he said that, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Verse 7, go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. Yay, Jesus, another miracle. That's the passive way. Look at what happened. This man's sitting there blind, begging like he had all the time. Jesus walks up. We don't know what he said. We don't know how he interacted, but we do know this. The man's born blind, but he's not deaf. And Jesus walks up and spits in front of him. Imagine the blind guy going, I think he just spit. Now, this is a culture, and to make mud, he spit pretty healthily. Now, you make a noise when you spit. You can't spit without making a noise, otherwise it's called drooling, okay? He spit. And he made mud and then rubbed it and put it on his face. This is not normal. In a society that valued cleanliness, you don't just walk around wiping mud on people's faces. Show of hands, how many of you this week had a total stranger wipe mud on your face? And there are none. It's not right. And it's messy. But then he goes on, not only does he do what is not natural, not normal, but he also goes a step further. He says, go and wash in the pool of Siloam. He's telling a blind man, not only am I going to do something to you that does not make sense. I don't understand why you got to wipe mud on my face. Now, if this infliction, this hopelessness wasn't enough, you're making it worse. It seems like it's worse, but there's something there in the engagement where we realize, you know what? What have I got to lose? I'm going to trust this. He says, go. You know, you and I can walk down to a pool where people knew where it was, but he's blind. There are no seeing eye dogs. There's no canes. He's got to get there. And he decides, I'm going to engage. I'm going to do what he told me to do. Because that's what Jesus said. And his whole hopelessness was turned into light. When you and I invite God into that, we're going to start to discover who Jesus really is. I love David, King David, one of the biggest screw-ups, made the biggest mistakes, but he always engaged with God. He always kept coming back. Lord, speak to my heart. I know what I've done wrong. Thank you for convicting me. Here I am. I love what he wrote in Psalm 16:11. He says, you make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. Jesus does not give joy, he is joy. And we have to engage him to experience what he wants to do in the least of our lives. Am I willing to do that? Am I willing to say, here it is? Because here's the reality. When we engage with him, we're probably not going to understand. It's probably going to get messy. And we're probably going to have to do something that is unnatural. But the result is what is supernatural. And that is what God wants to do in our lives. I don't know what yours is today. Your regret, you're hopeless. But if you'll let Jesus in, I'm telling you, I've experienced it firsthand. I was just out of college and I'd worked and I left the corporate world. And I'll never forget that culmination of don't understand, not natural, messy. And I was like, Lord, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. And I prayed, and I'm like, Lord, what do I do? And I just really sensed God saying, well, what do you love to do? I love to encourage people. I love to bring joy to them. And I sensed God going, oh, okay, do that. Okay, Lord, see, here's the problem. People don't really hire for that. So what do I do? And I just sense God keep going, delight yourself in me, and I'll give you the desires of your heart. But Lord, here's what I need. I need a paycheck, 1st and 15th. And I'd heard God laugh almost audibly. And I started to pursue this. I took a lot of part-time jobs. And over 2.5 years, about 2 years and 8 months, I started to transition to where I started to get some traction, started to enjoy this. I got to tell you, when I hear Brian talk about starting the church and the struggles and having to paint houses, I sit right back over there and I'm like, yes, me too, I get it. And then it was one of those times, at this point, I had very little to offer, but I met this really beautiful girl who was brilliant. And I wanted to marry her to the point where I went over to my parents one time. She was back with hers. And my parents said, oh, where's Heather? And I said, well, she went to see her parents. And they go, oh, we just love her. And my mother actually said this, you don't marry her, you're an idiot. Okay, so and I agree. And so I was saving up for a ring. And I was saving up. And I came back from a weekend, the biggest comedy event I'd ever done. 500 people bought a ticket. I was on cloud nine. This is great. Saving up for a ring. A buddy of mine who had a pressure washer business, he says, hey, I know it's a secret, but I know you're saving up for a ring. He says, I got a job if you want to do it. He said, it's at a shopping center. I got to pressure wash sidewalks, paint the curbs. It's from 11 o'clock at night till 7 in the morning. I said, I'm there. I landed from the high of highs. Great, this is what I love to do. I put on my grubby clothes, go straight to the shopping center, and he goes, here's the tank, here it is, where it is. And oh, by the way, the owners are coming tomorrow, and there's a dumpster. Just need to clean up around that a little bit, and there's a roll of carpet. they got out of one of the stores. It's been sitting there for a while. Just cut it up. Here's a box cutter. Cut it up into small pieces. Throw it in the dumpster if you would. That's all he said. Did the pressure washing. What I didn't realize, I get back there, this is a massive roll of carpet. Sitting outside for almost 8 months. Wet, grungy, dirty. Had been in a store for years. And I'm like, what the crud? So now I'm trying to cut it up in as big of pieces as I can to get it in there, but small enough so I can lift it. And so I cut the first piece of it. It is disgusting. I'm just, oh, God. And I got to pick it up. And so I'm on the front, and it's gross. And I'm just like, this is not my favorite. And so I get under it. I get my legs, and I throw it up. And I'm like, that is disgusting. And I thought that was the worst it was going to get. Well, it teetered on the top of the dumpster. And it didn't make it in. It fell over, hit me in the side of the head, unrolled on top of me. I'm laying next to a dumpster face down with gross carpet on top of me. I have to worm my way out, and I was not a happy person. I said words I probably should not have said. And I remember getting that piece in there, and I remember being mad. And I'm having a conversation. I am engaging God, and it wasn't nice. I'm like, Lord, really? This is what you want? I said, last night, that's what I'm called to. This is ridiculous. And I sensed God in that moment whisper part of his truth to me. And I remember the verse came to my mind, Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, do it with all your heart, as unto me, not as unto men. And I wish I could have said, oh, that's a great verse, Lord. Thank you. I was mad. I'm like, you want that. And then another verse came to my mind. It was Hebrews 11:6. He says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. For you must believe he exists and that he rewards those who diligently seek him. I wish I could say I had a great attitude. I did not. I cut that out. I said, you want a nice dumpster? You get a nice dumpster. And I'm throwing this stuff in. I am covered in goop. And I looked at it, and I'm like, it's all in there. I said, okay, nice. Okay, I'm getting a broom. I'm sweeping up. I'm wiping the sides of the dumpster. And by the time I got done, I'm just like, okay, Lord, how's that? Is that excellent? And God just whispered in my heart, Ken, I don't ask you to do anything that's not for your good. He says, if you can do this with excellence, when nobody sees it and nobody cares, and you'll do it as unto me with excellence, then you'll be ready to be in front of thousands and have the humility to understand what it takes to be there. And I made the money, and I got to be engaged. God always has a purpose in this process. Am I going to understand? Not all the time. Is it going to get messy? Yep, it's going to get messy. But when we engage God, he says, I have a plan. Because the third step is where he wants us to get that abundant life. Not only encounter God passively, moving to engage God personally, but to enjoy life completely. That's where he wants us to be. Jesus says, I came that you have life to the full. If you look in this passage in chapter 9, between verses 8 and 11, this blind man has just gained his sight. This is the happiest day of his life. And you know what he encounters? People that are just stupid. And he can hear them. They're like, did you see the guy born blind? You know the beggar? Yeah, he can see now. And people are going, no, it's not him. No, it just looks like him. And they're saying that while he's standing there. And he's like, it is to me. I'm that man. And they're like, really? Well, how did it happen? Well, the man they call Jesus, he put mud on my face. I washed it and I can see. Yeah, I don't get it. You got to go talk to the authorities. They take him, drag him into church to the legalist. You were last year. You know how fun those guys are. And he texts him in there and says, okay, what happened? And he says, Jesus. And, well, he did it on the Sabbath, so he is not a good guy, and that didn't happen, and you weren't born blind. Drag his parents in. And this is what happens. When we engage Jesus, people will discount it, and they will frustrate us, and they will totally miss the point until they choose to encounter Jesus and engage him. And he goes through this process, and his parents do that, and it goes on and on. Here's the deal that I've learned, and I can't remember if it was Ron Blue or Larry Burkett that said this first. Maybe they were quoting somebody. We live in a society, and America is a country. We spend money we don't have to buy things we don't need to impress people we don't like. And Jesus said, come unto me, all who are weary and burdened of all that, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke, learn from me, and I will give you rest. And God wants us to enjoy life completely. Romans 8:11, and this is one of my favorite verses, is Brian was talking about the resurrection and what happens when we take it personally. As we invite Christ into our lives and we say, you know what, Lord? I confess with my mouth, you are who you said you were. And I believe in my heart, you were raised from the dead. God says, when you get to that point, you will be saved. And at that point in Romans 8, chapter 11, this is one of my favorite verses. And it says, if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, then he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies because of his spirit that lives in you. The resurrection, when we make it personal, it changes everything. So my challenge to you and I this morning is, are we willing to make it personal? Do I really want to enjoy life completely? I got a wonderful challenge God just put on my heart. I was flying one time somewhere, and I was looking at reading a magazine. And for those of you under 30, let me just say magazine. It was like this book of stories. It wasn't really a book. It was just thinner pages, smaller stories. And I read this story that changed everything. It was about a company and the lead salesman in that company. And I remember being in sales, and I read the story, and it blew my mind. The head of the company invited the top salesman and his wife to dinner. And they're going to the nicest restaurant in town. As they walk up to the doors of this restaurant, the president, CEO of the company opens the door, stops, and reaches down and picks up a penny. And he looks at it. And he goes to put it in his pocket and just stood there looking at this penny for an uncomfortable time. The wife's thinking, do we walk around him? Do we wait? What do we do? And finally, she's about to do something, and he opens the door, and they walk in. They sit down, and the president said, man, thank you for your sacrifice. Your husband's incredible. He's invaluable. Thank you for what you support him. If there's anything we can do or any questions you have about the company, just let me know. And we just wanted to celebrate. And she goes, well, I really only have one question. He goes, you can ask me anything. She said, what's up with the penny? And he goes, what do you mean? She said, the penny. We're walking in, and you look down, and you find a penny. You're staring at this penny. He goes, oh, my gosh. I don't even realize I do that anymore. She said, what's up with the penny? And he said, you know what? Company was struggling. We were growing, but it was too fast, and we were overextended, and it was cutting. It was going to be cut bait, or just how is this going to work out? He said, I had to leave the office and just go get a cup of coffee. I'm walking down the sidewalk coming back, and as I walked back, there was this penny on the sidewalk, and this voice, he said, I believe it was divine, he just said, pick it up. He's like, it's a penny. He said, pick it up. He said, so I reached down, I picked up the penny, and went to put it in my pocket, and that same still small voice said, what does it say? And he said, what do you mean, what does it say? It says, in God we trust. And that voice said, do you? Right now. Do you? Well, what you're worried about right now? Do you trust me in that? The part you're most worried about. And he said, I sat there, I don't know how long, and I just said, Lord, I do. Please give me wisdom. What do I need to do? Even if I don't understand it, I want to know your best. He said, every time I see a penny now, I look at it, and no matter where I am, I'm like, Lord, what am I worried about right now? And do I trust you and engage you in this? And God speaks to my heart. He says, I keep a dish of them on there. I said, I read that article. Can I tell you this day, I cannot walk by a penny on the ground. It's just an opportunity to engage God and me to go, God, I want to thank you. I started looking at the date on it, and I look at that year, and I think, thank you for what you brought me through. Right now, here's what I'm anxious about, Lord. I thank you that you want to be in the middle of it. You want to walk with me through this. When we do that, it changes everything. When we decide we're not going to worry about what people say, but who Jesus really is and who God is and that Spirit in us. This guy ends up, and it's two of my favorite verses out of this story. They call him back to the legals together. They go, okay, tell us again one more time. What did he do? He says, I'm done. He makes a choice. I'm going to start enjoying life. He said, I've already told you what he did. And we know he's evil. And he says, you know what? Here's the deal. And in verse 25, he replied to them, whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I do know, I was blind, and now I see. Drop the mic. And they kicked him out. They kicked him out. And he's like, you know what? I'd rather have my sight and an encounter with God than anything that you provide. And he walks, and Jesus tracks him down. And in verse 35, he says, do you believe in the Son of Man? And this guy who's now seeing, he said, show me who he is. Show me who he is so I can worship him. And look at the words Jesus uses in verse 37. You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. See, Jesus changes everything. This morning we have an incredible ordinance that we do here on a regular basis, communion. You got one of these coming in. I'm going to pray over us in a second. But this morning we're going to do it differently. I want everybody to take this, and I want you to hold it up at least eye level, okay? Take this eye level. You got it. Today we're going to do it differently. I want you to take a chance while they're singing up here to engage God personally. You can do it where you sit. If you feel the need, you want to come and kneel, you can do that. You want to get by yourself somewhere in the room, do that. But you're going to do this individually. And I challenge you. Take what you're worried about, what's broken, what's happened in life, and say, Lord, you were broken so that I could be whole. I believe that. And Lord, you shed your blood. You died so that I could have life and life abundant. And I accept that today. And just connect, engage God in that way. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to stand up, and I want to just read a couple verses. Go ahead and stand up, and we're going to sing. And during this amazing celebration song, I want these words to just resonate in your mind and your hearts. Go ahead and bow your heads. Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for David writing these words. And I pray this week that we would go back to Psalm 34 and just see what enjoying life looks like. Father, thank you for the writing in Psalm 34:6. This poor man called, and you heard him, and you saved him out of all his troubles. You say that your eyes are on the righteous, and your ears are attentive to our cries. Lord, you are close to the brokenhearted and save those who are crushed in spirit. The righteous person may have many troubles, but you deliver us from them all. Lord, as we take this individually, speak to our hearts and let us see what engaging with you is. And if we don't understand, we take the steps anyway. Lord, thank you for this day of celebration. Help us to step closer to you in everything, to lean in to your presence. It's the name of Jesus and the power that raised him from the dead that lives in us who believe that I pray. Amen. Let's celebrate.
Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Then out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Then out of the silence, the roaring
much, Kelly. So good to have all of you here today. I want to ask you just to stick around for just a moment. If you're still holding your communion stuff and you're like, I don't know what to do, take it. Okay? As Ken said, it's self-guiding during the song, so go ahead and take that right now. Couple things as we get ready to go. First of all, many of you have been here over the last 3 weeks, and you were visiting on Easter weekend, and you took us up on our challenge. Matter of fact, we've had almost 900 people take us up each weekend just to be here that weren't here before, and we're so thankful and excited that you were here. Some of you are here for the very first Sunday. I'm gonna issue a new 3-week challenge, okay? Just come for 3 weeks, check it out. It's hard to know about a church in one Sunday, all right? And just give it a chance and a shot. So let me tell you what to do next. If you've been here for the last 3 weeks, or even if you're watching online and you haven't been in the building yet, we have some next steps. One of those steps is called our Next Steps class. And if you are now interested in being either a member or what we call here a partner at Westridge Church, we have a series of classes. The first one is just about Westridge Church, what we believe, what we're doing in the community, what we value, our vision, a little bit of our history. And it just will help you to know how to get connected here, how to get involved in serving and being in a group. And you heard Steve talk earlier about just going on a missions trip. We're real big and not only into community engagement, but also into our global missions initiatives as well. So we just want to tell you about what we're doing as a church and give you an opportunity to connect there. We also have another step called First Step. Some of you are here today, and maybe you're here for the first time or you've been here for the last 3 weeks. You just have a lot of questions about the Bible. You have a lot of questions about God. And they're all good questions, but you're like, I don't know who to ask these questions to. We have a class that's just for you. It's an opportunity for you to sit in a room with other people who have similar questions and go, hey, I just have some questions about Jesus. I don't get it. Like, how is he different? How is this different than all the other religions? Or why is the Bible, how do I know this is true? All these questions, that's what First Step's all about. And if you want to either take next steps, first steps, fill out the Get Connected card, which is in the pocket in front of you, in the chair in front of you. Take it, either put it in the buckets on the way out, or you can take it to the help center, and they will take this from you and help you take your next step. If you made a decision this morning, you put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ to be your personal Savior, let us know you did that. We would love to follow up with you and help you to take your next step there as well. So, okay, let me tell you about what's about to happen. As you know, we're getting out a little early this morning. All right, typically we get out at about 12:10. It's almost 12 o'clock. You're like, whoa, what just happened here? Well, we're going to celebrate today the fact that we've just did our 3-week challenge. So here's what's going to happen, okay? I've actually been told to warn you a little bit. As you go out into the atrium, okay, there's going to be some fun music. You're like, what's fun music? It's probably what's on your radio in your car as you get out, okay? All right, we're going to eat some crumble cookies. You ever had those? Oh, those are so good, okay? We're going to eat those, all right? There's going to be confetti, all right? In church, yeah, let me find a verse on that. No, you're not going to find it. We're going to have some fun, all right? So we just want to celebrate the fact that you have been here for 3 weeks, and we've been doing this together, and so grateful for Kenn Kington. Such a great word today. Thank you, Kenn, for making us laugh, teaching us the Word of God. Such a great job today. So, if you're not into confetti, fun music, crumble cookies, there's doors on those sides. But here's why we're letting out a little early. We want you to go get your kids. Our kids ministry area, they're prepared for you to come early to get your kids, because if you eat cookies without them, it's going to be a long ride home for you, okay? So those of you who have been here for the last 3 weeks, I'm going to let you a little on something else. We do this again next Sunday. We'd love to have you back next week. Tomorrow night is one of my favorite nights here at Westridge Church, the first Monday night of every month. We have our night of prayer. I'm just going to tell you, it's a powerful time. You guys are going to be here, right? Young adult ministry, I can always count on you, all right? It's going to be a great, great night. Every single month it's been growing. God's been moving. We're seeing prayers answered. Tomorrow night, I'm going to tell you, we're going to celebrate answered prayer. And that's what tomorrow night's going to be all about. I'm going to be leading it. So we will see you next Sunday, Westridge Church. Go that way. Let's celebrate what God's been doing. We love you. Have a great weekend.